We begin today the Gemara on Daf Tzaddik Hey Amud Beis, 5 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Amar Rav Yehuda said, Yayin hanimkar b'chanus, wine that's sold in the store. Now this is not wine that's good quality. This is talking about wine that begins to go sour already. It still has a taste of wine, but the aroma of it is vinegar. The bracha is still Beir Priya Gofen because it still has a wine taste, so that's the bracha. But Rav Chisda says, by wine that's already vinegar, that's going sour, so why are we making a special bracha of a gofen on it? In other words, Rav Chisda holds that on such wine, the bracha is shahakal ne'evidvarai, like water or anything like that. Meisvei, the Gemara asks, it says, ala pas she'ipsha, when it comes to bread that rotted, or valayayin shehikrin, or wine that became sour, or valtavshol she'ibra tzurasai, or any other cooked food that became so rotten that it has a different appearance. Aimer shahakal ne'evidvarai. So the bracha on this is shahakal. So here, one of the things it says, yayin shehikrin, that, that's what it says here. Rotten bread is shahakal. And it says that wine as well, when it becomes sour, the bracha is shahakal. So this is a question on Rav Yehuda that says that the bracha is still a Beir Priya Gofen. Rav Zvid answers, Moide Rav Yehuda will agree, b'portzimah, the mizdavna karnasa, when it comes to wine that becomes so sour. This is portzimah. I think portzimah is wine that's very bad. It's made from the sediments of the wine with water, and it went very bad. The Rashbam says portzimah is that not only the aroma of the wine changed, but even the appearance of it and the entire thing is bad, then everybody agrees that the bracha will be shahakal. Amalei Abaye Rav Yosef, Abaye said to Rav Yosef, Ha Rav Yehuda, Ha Rav Chisda, we have here the two opinions, Rav Yehuda and Rav Chisda, what the halacha is, if it's a shahakal or Beir Priya Gofen. Mar kaman svirele. The master, Rav Yosef, what is your opinion like? So here the Gemara will bring a braisa, and the Gemara will go through a lengthy explanation, a few opinions in the understanding of this braisa, and then from there it'll come out explaining what Rav Yosef understood from this braisa. Now the basis of the machlokes here is, when you have wine that begins to sour, and it still has a taste of wine, but it has the aroma of vinegar, do you follow the taste, and the bracha is still hagofen, or do you go after the aroma, and therefore you say the bracha is shahakal? And based on this, we'll see here what we can understand from the braisa. So now the Tanya, we learned in the braisa, haboidik es achavis, a person that's tasting wine in a barrel. Now what is he doing with this barrel? He has a bunch of barrels of wine that he wants to either drink from them or sell from them. So he designates one barrel of wine that will always separate the truma and meiser from that barrel so that he could sell or drink from any of his other barrels. Now this barrel of wine that he designates, so lies mafresh aleh truma, he's going to now separate from this barrel the truma, and like all the time, whenever he wants to sell or drink, he separates from here the truma. Now he tasted from it, and then when he tasted it, it tasted fine, like it's good wine. Then later on, nimtzis chaimitz, he tastes it again a while later, and now he sees that it already turned into vinegar. So the question is, what he separated for the trumas and meisers in between, could we assume that it was wine, or should we assume that it was already vinegar? And the halacha is that you can't separate trumas and meisers from vinegar for wine. The Rashbam actually brings a that there's a difference of opinion about this, and according to the Rashbam, this Gemara is following the opinion of Rebbe that says you can't separate from vinegar the trumas and meisers for wine. Other Rishonim say that even according to the Chachamim that say that you can, but over here, because he thought that it was still wine, because he tasted it in the beginning, and when it turns out to be vinegar later, so this is not the trumas and meisers he wanted to separate, so the whole thing would be a mistake. So the Braisa says, Kol Gimel Yom, for 3 days, Vadai. We know for sure what this is. Mikam ve'elech, but after those 3 days, Safik. Then it's a doubt what its status is. So it's not clear what's the pshat of the Braisa. When it says 3 days, we know for sure what its status is. Which 3 days is it? And what's that status that we know for sure that it is? So the Gemara says, Mai ka'omar, what is this Braisa saying? So there's 3 opinions here. First opinion, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan says, Hachi ka'omar, this is how we understand the pshat of the Braisa. Kol gimel yomim arishayim. The first 3 days after he tasted it and I had a taste of wine, vadayayin. those 3 days we could for sure assume that it's wine. Whatever Trumas HaMaisos he separated then is good, and if there's anyone else that bought from him, they don't have to separate again. But Mikam ve'elech, after those first 3 days, Safik. Here it's going to be a Safik, and therefore whoever bought from him will have to separate Trumas HaMaisos again. So the Gemara explains the basis of Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. My time, what's the reason? Because Chamre me'iloi okar. The wine, when it goes sour and it turns into vinegar, from where does it begin going sour? From the top of the barrel of the wine. And v'hai tome, this person tasted it, and v'lo yokar, and it did not yet, the taste didn't change at all. He saw that it had a good taste of wine. So im timtzaloima, even if you're going to say that basa de teime, that after you tasted it, okar, that it began going bad, but still in the first 3 days, havereche chala, v'tame chamra, maybe the aroma, it began smelling like vinegar, but v'tame chamra, in the first 3 days, we know for sure that it still tasted like wine. And v'chol reche chala v'tame chamra, anytime you have wine that the aroma is like vinegar, but the taste is still like wine, chamra. As the halacha of wine. Therefore, the first 3 days, we know for sure that it's still considered to be wine. So as you see over here, the basis of Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is that regarding the status of this wine, we say that as long as it tastes like wine, it's wine, even if the aroma is vinegar. Rabbi Shua ben Levi Yomar, Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, Kol gimel yamim ha'achrayim. No, the pshat in the Braisa is the opposite. When it said the 3 days, we know for sure what it is, he was talking about the last 3 days. Before he just tasted it and discovered that it's vinegar, then I say vadei chometz. It's definitely vinegar. Mikan ol halon, but anything before these last 3 days, safik. There, whatever was separated from it will be a safik. My time. So what's the reason for Rabbi Shua ben Levi's opinion? So Rabbi Shua ben Levi, the Gemara will explain, he goes after the aroma. Chamra mitato yokar. First of all, you can say that when wine begins going bad, it begins going bad not from the top of the barrel, but from the bottom of the barrel. So when he tasted it in the beginning and it was still good, so you could say, oh, that's because he tasted it on the top of the barrel, but it already started going bad on the bottom of the barrel. So therefore, even from before the last 3 days, we already have a suffix about the status of this wine. Besides that, the Gemara says, first the Gemara concludes this point, ve'emer, and therefore I say, okar, it already began going sour, v'lavadaitei, and he didn't realize, even though he tasted it in the beginning, but he tasted it only on the top. But now the Gemara says, even if you're going to say that when the wine goes bad, like Rabbi Yochanan said, it begins going bad from the top of the barrel, and he tasted it, and he saw that it still had a good taste of wine, but nevertheless, I say, maybe right after he tasted it, it began going bad, and it already got an aroma of vinegar, and it still has a taste of wine. And if it has only the aroma of vinegar, even though it still tastes like wine, we follow the aroma and we say that it's actually vinegar. So therefore, as you see, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's opinion is that you don't go after the taste, you go after the aroma. If it's the aroma is of vinegar, then it's considered to be vinegar. Now, this is the basis over here of the explanation of the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Chisda as well regarding which bracha you make. Do you follow the taste, and therefore wine that begins going sour still has a taste of wine, so the bracha is better priyagofen, like Rabbi Yehuda said, or you follow the aroma? That's what Rav Chisda says, and therefore it'll be shahakal. The Gemara brings a third opinion here in the explanation of this braisa. Dreimoi, the Chachamim of the south, Masna Mishmei Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, they taught in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that explained this braisa. They said, Yishayim vadayayin. After this person tasted the wine of this barrel in the beginning and he saw that it was good wine, so the first 3 days after that, it's definitely wine. And so to Achrayim, the last 3 days before he tasted it and he discovered that it was vinegar, that's also, we know, Vadei Chometz. It's definitely vinegar. However, Emtsoyim, the days in between, Safik. That's where there's a doubt whether it's wine or vinegar. Okay, so when the Braisa said Gimel, the 3 days are Vadai, the Braisa meant both the first 3 days and the last 3 days. The first 3 days is definitely wine, and the last 3 days is definitely vinegar. But the Gemara now asks on this explanation, according to what we explained before, that the point here is you have to look at whether the taste is wine or whether the aroma is still of wine. So how do we explain this last opinion here? This opinion here seems to be contradicting itself, because Amrit, on one hand you say Rishayim Vadayayin, that after the first time he tasted it, the first 3 days, it's definitely wine. What does that mean? Why is it still definitely wine? Alme, what I see is Reiche Chola, that even if the aroma is vinegar, but the time chamre, but if it still tastes like wine, chamre, I go after the taste and I say that it's wine. Because even in the beginning, right after you tasted it, it's possible that it already has an aroma of vinegar, but it's not possible that the taste changed so quickly, so we go after the taste and it's still wine. But then afterwards you say, that the last 3 days, it's definitely vinegar. Alme, what I see from this is that if it has an aroma of vinegar and has a taste of wine, you say that it's definitely vinegar. Because you have to say that, because otherwise the last 3 days before he tasted it and he discovered that it's vinegar, how do you know for sure that I had a taste of vinegar already before? It could be that it still had a taste of wine, so it should really still be a suffix. So it must be that you follow the aroma, and since it has an aroma of vinegar, it's vinegar. So what's the story? Do you follow the taste or do you follow the aroma? So the Gemara answer is really you follow the taste. But over here, the case is the reason why the last 3 days you say that it's definitely vinegar. The case here is that when he tasted it, it was not stam vinegar. It was very strong vinegar. You see for sure that it must have started turning vinegar for a while. So therefore, the first 3 days before that, or the 3 days before that, you know for sure that it's already vinegar. If not for the fact that it already began tasting like vinegar for 3 days, he wouldn't have discovered such strong vinegar here. Okay, so now the Gemara goes back to what Rav Yosef told Abaye, that I have a braisa that is the source of my opinion regarding whether the bracha is shahakal or b'rei priya gofen. Says the Gemara, Kamam Pashatli. When Rav Yosef says that he has this braisa, according to which opinion did he follow? Did he resolve the shayla? Rav Mari Rav Zvid argue Chadam Rav Yechanan. One opinion says that he went according to Rav Yechanan, that says you go after the taste, and therefore even when it begins to sour, it has an aroma of vinegar, but the taste is wine. Another opinion is that he goes according to Rabbi Shua ben Levi, that you follow the aroma, which goes like Rav Chizda, and therefore the bracha is going to be shahakal. The Rashbam over here says, what's the halacha in such a case? The Rashbam says that the halacha is, where is it again? The nirali, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yechanan, that you follow the taste, and therefore the bracha will still be hagafen. Itmar, we learned another machlokes regarding one that sells wine. A person sells a barrel of wine to his friend, and it went sour. So Rav says, Kol Gimel Yamim Arishonim, the first 3 days after he bought it, if that's when it went sour, but this wine is still considered to be the responsibility of the seller, and therefore he's going to have to reimburse him for this, because if he sold him wine and it went sour so quickly, we know for sure that it already was not good wine when he was selling it, and therefore it's going to be his responsibility. It's a mekach tos. But if it's after 3 days that it went sour, then that's already in the responsibility of the buyer. It's his problem that it went sour. Shmuel says, no, even in the first 3 days, the seller is not responsible, because chamre akasfe de more shavar, wine on the shoulder of the buyer or of the owner, it's shaking around. According to the Rashbam, this is an expression that says that the condition of a person's wine depends on his mazel. The fact that it went bad so quickly after 3 days, or within the 3 days that he bought it, that's the bad mazel of the buyer. It's not the responsibility of the seller. Other Rishonim, Tosfos here, disagree with this pshat, and they say that this expression does not mean that. The Gemara later says an expression where it talks about the mazel of a person that owns wine. The Rashbam quotes here from later in the Gemara, but if we hear it means something else. Here it means that it's possible that the buyer, when he was carrying the wine home from the cellar and he put it on his shoulder and it was shaking around, he didn't take it in the right way, so therefore that's what caused it to go bad, that's how it became bad, and therefore it's not the seller's responsibility. So the Gemara Avad Rav Yosef Uvde Kvasei de Rav B'Shichra. Rav Yosef Paskin B'Poil, like Rav's halacha, that it's the seller's responsibility when it comes to beer. And with Kvasei de Shmuel, and he Paskin like Shmuel B'Chamre when it comes to wine. The Hilchase Kvasei de Shmuel, and the halacha is like Shmuel also regarding wine. Always
the seller.
That it's no, that it's not. That it's always the buyer's problem. It's his bad mazel or it's his fault. We learned in the Braisa whether this is beer that's made from dates, or beer made from barley, or whether this is wine that's made from the sediments of the grapes that you pour water into it. The bracha will be shahakal. Another opinion is shmarim sheyesh b'hem tam yayin. If you're making wine by pouring water onto the sediments of the grapes and it has a taste of wine, mevarach aleim b'yre pri hagafen. The bracha will be b'yre pri hagafen. Rabbi and Rav Yosef damri tarvayu. So Rabbi and Rav Yosef both said, "Ein halacha ka'acherim." We don't paskin like this opinion of acherim. Now Rav explains that it really will depend. Amar Rav says Rav the kula alma. Everybody will agree regarding making wine by pouring water onto the sediments of the grapes. Rama tlosa. If he pours 3 cups of water onto the sediments, and va'asa arba, and he's able to take out from it now 4 cups of wine, what does that mean? So that chamruhu, this definitely is going to have the halacha of wine, because you pour 3 of water and now it's 4. You have 4 here. That means that from the sediments there's 1 out of the 4 cups, which is wine, and that's enough to consider it to be wine. So the Gemara explains why Rav said this, that everybody agrees to this. Rav is following his reasoning, but he said elsewhere, Rav says, Kol chamra, any wine, deledori al chatlas maya, that wasn't diluted with 3 parts water against 1 part of wine, lav chamru. It's not really proper drinkable wine. And it's talking about in the times of the Gemara when the grapes were very strong and you had to dilute it. So the way to dilute it is by 3 times water against the wine. So therefore here as well, when you pour water and it's 3 parts water and 1 part of the sediments, that creates 4 cups now, and so this is wine. On the other hand, if you pour 3 cups of water onto the sediments, and then you get out of it only 3 cups, the 3 cups come out. So then, then it's definitely not at all wine. The bracha is going to be shahakal. No one argues about that. Ki pligi. When was the argument here? Whether you make a bracha shahakal or hagafen in this case. The Rama tlosa, when he poured 3 cups of water onto the sediments, and v'asa tlosa palga, and he gets out 3.5 cups of water together mixed with these from the sediments. So what's the argument here? The Rabbanan say it's still going to be a shahakal. Why? Because tlosa ayil, 3 cups of water you poured onto these sediments, and tlosa nothing. Those 3 cups come out completely. So now pashle palge, there's another half a cup that came out of here, which came from the wine that's in the sediments. But upalge b'shita palge maya v'lei klumu. That half a cup of wine that came out, that's now mixed into 3 cups of water, which is 6 times as much as that half a cup of wine. So the way the Gemara says it is that it's 6 half a cups of water against that half a cup of wine. So maya, it's water v'loi klumu. It's nothing, because when you have wine that's mixed into water, it's diluted by 6 times that amount of water. It's not going to be wine. It's going to be water. But acherim sabri, the acherim that says that you still make a bracha b'yre pri hagafen, and the reason they say this is because they say tlasa ol. You poured 3 cups of water onto the sediments. What happened is some of the water that you poured here got absorbed into the sediments. Wine comes out of the sediments, and some water gets absorbed into the sediments. So therefore, train opal genofik. Now there's only 2.5 cups of water that come out of this. Pashle kuze. So now if you have 3.5 cups of wine, that means that you have really a full cup of wine here. And the kuze betray opalge. If you have 1 cup of wine that's diluted, that's mixed with 2.5 cups of water, chamra malayu, that's good wine, and therefore the bracha will be b'yre pri hagafen. Okay, so according to Rav, it comes out that the only time that there's an argument is in this case when there's another half a cup of, when there's again 3 cups of water, and now comes out 3.5. So the Gemara asks on this. Let's just finish the Indian over here. And when it comes out more than the shear of what you poured in, is it going to be a machlokes? That's what Rav says over here. When it comes out, you pour in 3 and it comes out 3.5. That's when they're arguing. But we learned in the Mishnah, Hametamed v'nosan mayim b'midah. A person that is pouring water onto the sediments, that's what metamed means. This kind of wine is usually actually called temed. So he's metamed, he pours water onto the sediments. B'midah, a certain amount. Umatza kidei midasai. And he takes out from it the exact same amount of water that he poured into it. Potter. So for this, he's going to be potter for giving meister from this, because it's not wine, it's water. So you don't have to give meister from water. Rabbi Yehuda mechayev. However, Rabbi Yehuda says that no, you still have to give meiser from this, even though it came out the same amount, but nevertheless it has a taste of wine. It's still considered to be wine, and you have to give meiser for this. So what do you see from this? At kan le pligi ela b'chdei midasei. When are they arguing over here whether this is considered to be wine or water? That's if you pour in water onto the sediments and it comes out the exact same amount of water as you poured in before. Then there's an argument if it's called water or wine. But elo aval, that is, but it sounds like, but if it's anything more that comes out from what you poured in, so then loy pligi, there wouldn't be any argument about this. Everybody agrees that it's wine. So how could Rava say that when you pour in 3 and it comes out 3.5, that's when there's a machlokes here between the Acherim and the Rabbanan? Here we see that there's a machlokes when you pour in and it comes out the same amount. But if it's more, it seems like there's no argument. And says the Gemara, Hu adin, really the halach is that even if it would come out more than what you poured in, pligi. There would be an argument here as well, whether it's wine or water, like Rava explained. Why are they arguing even in a case where you pour in water and it comes out the same amount as you poured in? It's only to show you how far the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda goes. That even when you pour in the water and it comes out the same amount, Rabbi Yehuda says it still has a taste of wine, it's considered to be wine. One more thing, let's finish off here. So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak bar Yitzchak asked this as a shaila from Rab Chia bar Avin, and the Rashbam here says that he must have not been aware of this brisa that we just learned here. Shmarim sheyesh b'em tam yayin mahu. If you're pouring water onto the sediments and it has then a taste of wine, what's going to be the halacha? Basically, this kind of case, even when it comes out the same amount as you poured in, but it has a taste of wine, what's going to be the halacha? Is it wine or is it water? Amalei, so he answered him, do you think that if you pour on the sediments it's going to be wine? This is just something that has some kind of a taste, but it's not considered to be wine, it's still water, and therefore the bracha is going to be shahakal. You're not chayiv and trumas and ma'asers on this.